Hello guys, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about 5 things you should be doing if you want to lose fat. So let's get started. So number 1 is to set realistic goals. I know this sounds simple, but one of the biggest reasons I see people not succeed in their fat loss journey is because they set goals that are too big, and either they get disappointed because they're not reaching them, or if they do happen to reach those goals, they had to take such extreme measures to get there that they end up gaining all the weight back right away. So you want to make sure that you're being realistic in the goals that you're setting. So when it comes to weight loss, 5 pounds a month is a typical rule of thumb. I know that might not sound like a lot, but if you're losing weight faster than that, typically you are being a little bit too extreme with your protocols, and you're not going to be able to stick to it long term. You're going to end up gaining that weight back, which is obviously not what we want. We want to lose weight and keep it off. So break down your long-term goals into smaller short-term goals. So for example, if your goal is to lose 30 pounds, focus on what you want to do this month to lose those first 5 pounds. And with those short-term goals, think about small habits that you can change rather than trying to completely change your life overnight. So instead of trying some drastic diet where you cut out all of your favorite foods and you go from never being to the gym to trying to go every single day, start with small changes over time. It's gonna make it a lot more manageable, and you won't be so discouraged when you can't hit those unrealistic expectations. For women, and then you want to make sure you're tracking your progress and not just with the scale. Especially for women, the scale can fluctuate so much based on your cycle, what kind of foods you ate, how much water you drank. So it's not always the most reliable way to see if you're on the right track. I also recommend taking some progress photos or measurements. You can take your waist measurement or even your thigh or arm measurements and track those over time to make sure that you are on the right track. Number 2 is to track your calories and protein. Now I know a lot of people are against tracking calories, and it is possible to lose fat without tracking, but if you've never tracked your food before, it's going to be extremely difficult to know what is in the foods that you're eating and what kind of foods you should be eating to reach your goals. So I always recommend starting out with tracking to kind of get an idea. And then when you get a little bit more advanced, you can try losing fat without tracking. But the reason this is so important is in order to lose weight, you have to be in a calorie deficit, which means that you are consuming fewer calories than what you're burning. That is the key to losing weight. There's no other way around it. There's no special diet. No matter what, you have to be in a calorie deficit. So in order to figure out how many calories you should be eating, first we have to figure out how many calories you're burning. How many calories should you be eating? That is completely dependent and customized to each individual. So if you are interested in the math and the formulas to figure out how many calories you should be eating, I'm gonna go over that now, and you can feel free to follow along. If you're not a big fan of math and this whole thing stresses you out, I'll link a calculator down below so you can just punch your numbers in and it'll give you your calories. One thing to keep in mind with the calculator is I recommend putting in your goal to maintain your weight. That way the calculator will give you your maintenance calories and you can set your own deficit from there. I find sometimes the calculators go a little aggressive with the deficit to start. So I always recommend putting in maintenance calories and then adjusting it to the deficit on your own. I would start with a 10 to 15% reduction in calories to start, because those calculators are never going to be 100% accurate. For example, this one takes your weight, your height, and your age to calculate your calories. And 2 people can have the same age, weight, and height and have 2 different calorie needs. So it is different for each individual. The calculators are never going to be 100% accurate. So start small, but if we want to figure out your deficit calories, first we have to figure out how many calories you're burning in a day. So your TDEE is your total daily energy expenditure, which is the total number of calories you burn in a day, and that is broken up into your BMR, which is your basal metabolic rate. It's how many calories you burn at rest. your thermic effect of food, which is the energy it takes your body to digest the food that you're eating, your NEAT, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is all the activity you do on a daily basis that is not any activity that you're doing in your job or around the house, is all included in your NEAT. Even just fidgeting throughout the day burns a little bit of calories. That is NEAT. The last one is your exercise activity, which is the number of calories you burn through exercise. So to calculate your BMR, there are plenty of calculators out there and a couple different formulas you can use. This one is my favorite because it's the easiest and requires not a whole lot of information. But the caveat with that is that none of these are going to be 100% accurate. So this specific formula takes your weight, height, and age to calculate your BMR. Two people can have the exact same height, weight, and age and have a completely different BMR. So it is individual person to person. None of these formulas are going to be 100% accurate, but it can give you a good place to start. So this formula is 10 times your weight in kilograms plus 6.25 times your height in centimeters minus 5 times your age. And then for women, you're gonna subtract 161, and for men, you're going to add 5. So if you live in the States like myself, you are gonna have to convert your weight and height from pounds and inches to kilograms and centimeters, but you can do that pretty easily online. And then for an example, just kind of walk you through how the formula works. Let's say we have a 5'5" woman who weighs 150 pounds and is 30 years old. So we're gonna do 10 times her weight, which comes out to 68 kilograms, plus 6.25 times her height, which is 165 centimeters, minus 5 times her age, which is 30, minus 161 equals 1,400 calories. Now remember, that is just the BMR part of the equation. So we have to get the rest of her calories. Now the thermic effect of food is a very small number, so we're not going to include it in the formula because it's pretty much negligible. So we need to look at these two, which come down to your activity level. So to figure that out, we need to look at how active you are throughout the day, and that'll tell us what we need to multiply your BMR by to find your total daily energy expenditure. So sedentary means you sit most of the day and you don't really exercise. That's gonna be 1.2. Light activity means you either work a desk job and you work out a couple days a week, or you don't really work out, but you are working a job where you're on your feet most of the day. You're gonna multiply by 1.375. If you're moderately active, that means you're moving around throughout the day and you work out a couple times a week, or you work out really hard, but you work a desk job. Very active means you work a pretty active job and you work out several times a week. And extremely active is gonna be basically just professional athletes. So I'm guessing none of you are gonna be in that category. So let's just say she is moderately active. We're gonna multiply her 1,400 calorie BMR by the 1.55 activity level, and that is gonna give us 2170, which is the total calories that she burns in a day. Now, to find your calorie deficit, I typically recommend starting with the 10 to 15 calorie deficit. There's a bug flying in my face this whole time. So to find your calorie deficit, I typically recommend a 10 to 15% calorie deficit to start, because like I said, these calculators aren't gonna be 100% accurate, so you don't want to slice those calories down by a whole lot to start, because that could put you in a bit of an extreme deficit. So start small, track your progress, and adjust as needed. So if we go with a 10% calorie deficit, that's gonna put us at 1953 total calories for the day. So I know that's a lot of numbers and it might seem like a lot of math. I can link a calculator below so that you can just type your numbers in and it will give you this number. But this is kind of how you break it down to determine how many calories you should be eating for your deficit. So now that we figured out your calories, let's talk about protein. So adequate protein intake is gonna be super important for any goal, but especially if you wanna lose fat, because like I said, we can be in a calorie deficit to lose weight, but if you wanna make sure that that weight is coming from fat, you need to preserve your muscle mass. And in order to do that, you have to make sure you're eating enough protein. The other great thing about protein is that it has a higher thermic effect of food than carbs and fat, which means you're actually absorbing less calories from protein than you do if you're eating carbs and fat. On top of that, protein is also the most satiating macronutrient, which means it's going to keep you fuller for longer. So just to recap, you're gonna find your maintenance calories and then subtract a 10 to 15% calorie deficit, and you're also gonna track your protein. I recommend 2.2 to 2.4 grams of protein per kilogram of lean body mass. So you'll convert your weight to kilograms and then subtract your body fat. If you don't know your body fat percentage, you can just do 1.3 to 1.9 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So if you're on the leaner side, you'll go more towards 1.9, and if you have a higher body fat percentage to start, more towards 1.3. Number 3 is to eat higher volume foods. High volume foods are pretty much exactly what they sound like. Essentially, it means you can eat more food for fewer calories. So things like vegetables and lean protein are great because you can eat a large volume of food without taking up a lot of calories, versus something like processed foods is going to have a lot more calories in a smaller amount of food, and they're not going to keep you as full. So if we want to be in a calorie deficit, it's going to be a lot easier if you're eating higher volume foods as opposed to processed calorie dense foods. So as I mentioned before, protein is really good for keeping you full for longer, as well as fiber. So anything that, like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, is going to be higher in fiber, which is not only good for digestion, but also good for keeping you full. So a general rule of thumb is to have 10 to 15 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories that you're eating. And that's gonna make sure that you can eat in a calorie deficit without feeling like you're hungry all the time. You can also look into swapping out some of the foods that you normally eat for lower calorie options. So for example, if you normally have eggs in the morning for breakfast, you can swap out 3 eggs for 1 egg and 2 egg whites. And that's gonna bring down the calories a little bit. It'll still feel like you're eating your normal breakfast. So it's not gonna feel like a super dramatic change, but it's an easy way to decrease the number of calories that you're eating. You can also swap out fattier meats like beef and salmon for lean turkey or chicken, and try swapping out some of your higher calorie sauces for lower calorie options. So if you're having things like ranch or barbecue sauce, there's a lot of calories in those and they're not going to fill you up. So instead of using calories for sauces, try to find lower calorie sauce options or even some seasonings, and then you can use those calories towards actual food that's gonna fuel you. Number 4 is to prioritize strength training over cardio. A lot of people, if they decide they want to lose fat, they start adding in a whole bunch of cardio, which is going to burn calories and it will help you go into a calorie deficit, but there's no guarantee that that weight loss is going to come from fat. A lot of times you're going to be burning off muscle as well, and the worst thing you could do is put all this time into energy into losing weight and your body composition stays the same and you essentially look the same. If you want to change your body composition, you want to change the way that you look, you want to make sure that you are maintaining your muscle mass while losing fat, and that comes down to strength training. And last but not least, number 5 is to not neglect your recovery. Training hard is great, but it's just as important to make sure you're recovering well also. So that includes getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night, making sure that you're staying hydrated and drinking enough water, trying to reduce your stress levels. Increased stress is definitely going to inhibit your body's ability to burn fat, and it's going to prevent you from reaching your goals. And then make sure you take rest days. So you should have at least 1 to 2 days a week where you're not training at all. Just relax and let your body recover from the training that you've done. That training is not going to do you any good if your body can't recover from it. So anything you can do to reduce those stress levels and make sure that your body is just overall functioning optimally. If your body's not functioning optimally, it's not going to want to burn fat. So make sure that you take care of your body, give it everything it needs, and it will cooperate with you a lot better. So just to recap, if you want to lose fat, you need to make sure that you're setting realistic goals, tracking your calories and protein, eat high volume foods, make sure you prioritize strength training, and don't neglect your recovery. And if you do those 5 things, you are going to see progress towards your goals. You are going to lose fat. So if you enjoyed this video and you found it helpful, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you have any more questions, feel free to comment them down below, and I will see you in the next one.